Thank you and welcome back. We are now on to new business item D, which is to consider whether to authorize the Council Health and Safety Committee to explore legislation to regulate the use of tobacco products and or e-cigarettes in Brisbane and amend the city's zoning ordinance to limit the number or location of vapor lounges in Brisbane. And I do believe that this really should be authorized again for attorney fees to proceed with this, as with the last item.
Yes, it's a very similar item. This was a matter that was being considered by the Health and Safety Committee, and at the same time that the other matter was being considered. And again, before we go forward and move forward with this, staff, the city attorney, and the committee wanted some guidance from the council as a whole, because you have not considered your policy about the 5-hour policy. So just a little background on this. The committee is in the process of looking at whether to adopt regulations in Brisbane that would regulate the use of tobacco products as well as the use of e-cigarettes. Currently, Brisbane does not regulate the use of tobacco or e-cigarettes. The only requirement related to either in the city code is that there is a requirement that retailers of tobacco products obtain a tobacco retailer's permit, and that does not apply to e-cigarettes. State law does prohibit the smoking of tobacco products in certain places, and those requirements do apply in Brisbane. There are many jurisdictions have adopted local restrictions on tobacco use that are in addition to the restrictions that state law imposes. State law also bans the sale of both tobacco products and e-cigarettes to minors under the age of 18. With that exception, state law does not currently regulate e-cigarettes in any way. There is currently legislation that was recently introduced by Senator Mark Leno that is pending. If passed, that bill would reclassify and regulate e-cigarettes as tobacco products. There have been a number of unsuccessful bills introduced at the state level that would regulate e-cigarettes, but so far, beyond the sale to minors, nothing has passed. San Mateo County has adopted some regulations of tobacco products and the use of e-cigarettes. Under San Mateo County's law, smoking of tobacco products and the use of e-cigarettes are banned in the following places: enclosed structures owned or leased by the county, wherever located except in private residences, 30 feet from any enclosed county-owned structure, enclosed areas that are accessible to the public, businesses patronized by the public, and enclosed passageways between businesses, enclosed and unenclosed common areas in multi-unit dwellings, except in specifically designated smoking areas, individual units in multi-unit dwellings, and county-owned, county-operated, or county-maintained beaches, parks, and trails. In addition, the county prohibits the sale of both tobacco products and e-cigarettes in county-owned and leased buildings and from vending machines and self-service displays. All of these county regulations apply only in unincorporated areas of the county, so they do not apply in Brisbane, except to the extent that the county owns, leases, or maintains property within Brisbane. So with that exception, none of the county requirements apply within the jurisdiction of Brisbane. As I mentioned earlier, other jurisdictions statewide, many other jurisdictions statewide have adopted local tobacco and or e-cigarette regulations, including a number of cities and other jurisdictions within San Mateo County. Some of the jurisdictions in the county have adopted local ordinances that impose the identical restrictions that the county has adopted. Other jurisdictions have adopted some, but not all, of these restrictions, or have adopted the county's tobacco restrictions without extending those restrictions to e-cigarettes. On the other hand, there are some local governments within the county that have gone further than San Mateo County and have adopted even more onerous restrictions. For example, some jurisdictions have banned smoking and or the use of e-cigarettes in the following locations: sidewalks, outdoor eating areas, sports fields and arenas, events sponsored by a local entity, public transit depots, chemical storage areas, hotels and motels, and some in public places and others in guest rooms, indoor or outdoor service lines at business establishments. And then there are other jurisdictions outside of San Mateo County that have adopted a variety of different smoking or e-cigarette regulations. San Francisco, for example, has adopted fairly extensive restrictions on both tobacco and e-cigarette use. While San Francisco does not ban smoking or e-cigarette use in the individual units of multi-dwelling buildings in San Francisco, the city has adopted a number of the restrictions that I've mentioned above that the county has or other jurisdictions have. San Francisco, as is indicated in the staff report, have also extended the ban to a variety of other places as well. At the request of Council Member Lori Liu, I met recently with Shonda Shrugs, who is the San Mateo County public health educator, who is sitting here today, as well as Karen McCavalli from Breathe California, an advocacy group that worked with San Mateo County in adopting its recent tobacco and e-cigarette legislation. Both Ms. Shrugs and Ms. McCavalli offered to assist Brisbane should it decide to pursue adopting any tobacco or e-cigarette regulations. Additionally, Ms. Shrugs has provided a summary, and it's attached to the staff report, of jurisdictions within San Mateo County that have adopted a variety of different smoking or e-cigarette policies. And finally, Ms. Shrugs has provided to our office, and we've forwarded to the committee, the findings that the county relied on, the research that the county relied on to support its findings regarding the health and safety risks associated with e-cigarette use. So the purpose of us bringing this to you is to provide you with that update, but also, as with the last item, to get some policy guidance about whether or not to move forward with considering possible legislation. The committee met once on this item substantively, at least once that I was present. And depending on your policy direction, should you decide to adopt any legislation, depending on your policy direction, how much work would be required in terms of attorney time. Should the city decide to adopt legislation that is either the same as or substantially similar to what the county has done, there would be a fairly minimal amount of attorney time in order to draft the legislation, draft a staff report, and move forward with this. The county council has thoroughly vetted this, and most of the research on those issues have been done and would not need to be duplicated. So should the council decide to go in that direction, we anticipate it would be fewer than 10 attorney hours to bring this forward, including attendance at the council meetings associated with this. If the council wishes to adopt substantially different regulations than those adopted by the county, or adopt the county's regulations piecemeal, as some jurisdictions have done, the amount of attorney time required could be substantially increased depending on the policy direction that you take, depending on whether there are model regulations out there that we could piggyback on, and depending on how far you wanted to extend the restrictions, there may be some legal research required as well. Finally, the other issue that the committee is considering is whether or not to look at amending the zoning ordinance to regulate the number or location of vapor lounges within Brisbane. That is not something that we have looked at in any way at this point. Should you wish to have us look at that piece and draft legislation, we would anticipate that we would need to spend between 10 and 12 additional hours on that piece, doing the necessary research, drafting the legislation, and drafting the necessary reports. On that piece, however, that does not include any additional attorney time that would need to be spent attending the Health and Safety Committee meetings or the Planning Commission meetings. This would be a zoning ordinance change. It would need to go to the Planning Commission, or any additional time spent at council on the zoning piece. So at this point, we would like some policy direction from you about where to go with this.
Where do you want to start with the?
Sure. So this was another piece of proposed legislation that I brought forward to the Health and Safety Subcommittee in response to actually this came before we even started hearing some complaints. They came later, but it was due to there were other jurisdictions that were moving forward with legislating e-cigarettes, and I had heard about that and wanted to make sure that our city was up to speed on that as well. And since then, as you may recall, we had a Brisbane resident. Her mother came and spoke about her grandchildren and the Joy Avenue apartments being subjected to secondhand smoke. And then there's been numerous people who submitted letters and spoke before the council this evening. So I think this really is a major health and safety issue in our community, and other cities have been enacting legislation on e-cigarettes and multi-unit housing. And what we talked about when I met with the representative from Breathe, California, was that if Brisbane doesn't do anything, then one potential problem would be that people would come to Brisbane because smokers who feel like they can't go elsewhere, they may come here because the practices are permitted here. So we obviously don't want to be a haven for that type of behavior. And so what the Breathe California people told me was, there's clear law about the fact that there's no constitutional right to smoke, and secondhand smoke is quite dangerous. There's been many studies done showing the risks of lung cancer and also even the risks of fire, increased insurance costs. And so from a landlord's perspective, it's actually more beneficial to have a no smoking policy because it protects your property better from fire risk and also the people in it and the contents. And actually, the studies show that it makes your property more valuable. People will pay more to rent a property if it's got a no smoking policy. And so the two pieces, or I guess three, that I'd like to suggest we look at are the e-cigarette legislation, because it's not currently regulated, and it's being, the product is being used and marketed to children, and a lot of jurisdictions have been regulating it just so it's treated like any other tobacco product. And then also that the interior, the inside multi-unit housing, not just the common areas, but inside the units. A number of cities have moved forward with that, or prohibiting that, like Daly City, Belmont, Foster City, and the County of San Mateo. So these organizations are willing to help us out and defray many of the attorney costs. And as to the zoning piece, what we talked about with the representative from Breathe California, she suggested, and staff concurred, that that piece can be, because of the size of our city, we can actually pretty easily put a zoning regulation in place that basically says that you have to get like a conditional use permit, so that you can't have a zoning, you can't have a vaping lounge near, within a certain distance of schools and parks. And so because our town is so small, we would essentially be able to prohibit those types of establishments. So once again, this is something I feel very strongly about, that we have a large number of families moving into town. People have been complaining about this issue, and I think that it's time that we do something about it. The state and federal government, we can't wait for them. We have to take the initiative. I don't know if Ray has anything to add.
Yeah, well, said it very well. I'm with Samantha. I really think this is an important thing for us to do, and it's an important health matter. And I would plead with my fellow council members to let us go ahead and bring some legislation proposed before you. I happen to believe in doing it as efficiently as possible, and if we can use as much as we can of what's already out there, that's great, and no reason to reinvent the wheel. And so that's how I would approach it anyway. But I do think it's a very important thing that we need to deal with, and as was pointed out earlier, I mean, it is the major cause of unnecessary deaths in the United States. So I think we really have a health obligation to address the issue.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Certainly this is it's going to come sooner or later. And initiating it, I think is probably a prudent way to go. I mean, I know we got 3 written letters on the subject, and all compelling. Tony, yours is one. You didn't mention that you get higher rents. You didn't mention that you get higher rents for non-smoking apartments. I just want a clarification on what a vapor lounge is. I'm picturing it in my mind, and I kind of did a little research. Is that a place that maybe people go in to smoke, like a hookah lounge? I come across a hookah lounge, which is people smoking a communal pipe, basically with multiple ends. It kind of reminds me of something back in the 60s, the people would smoke pot out of, and, one of those things, and love, peace, and smoke dope. But or peace, love, smoke dope, or whatever it is. But anyway, I don't know. Michael, you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in a vapor lounge, I know that some cigar stores have, like, you can smoke inside or something like that as long as it's ventilated away from the rest of the store or something. Enlighten me. So
it's my understanding, I have not actually been inside one, but it's my understanding that a vapor lounge, generally speaking, is a place that people go to do generally 2 things. You can buy e-cigarette products there, and generally there's a place that you can smoke e-cigarettes and socialize in the process. State law does not regulate e-cigarettes at all, except to say that you cannot sell it to anyone under the age of 18. So there is no state regulation of vaping lounges, as they're called. So this is something that it's my understanding that the committee wants to look at. We have not delved into this at all. There are some research, there is some legal research we would need to do on this, depending on how aggressive you wanted to go with your restrictions. And so that would be part of the attorney time. We have not started that process at all.
Okay. All right. Personally, I'm willing to support, taking a look at this. I think, and not having legislation, I don't really know what e-cigarettes, do or don't do. I see people puffing on them, and I see something come out, and I have no idea what it is, But it's something I certainly wouldn't want my grandkids subjected to, as far as secondhand smoke. I know I used to be subjected to my mother's secondhand smoke, just going, and I think, Tony, you wrote that in your letter about, a product of the society back in the 50s, and just how it was. Mm-hmm. And how I always used to get on her case. You need to quit smoking, Mom, this is and, she died of emphysema, was a product of smoking, So certainly I think it is probably a prudent course of action. I think it'd be money well spent to look at investigating this. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to start off with the same question that I did for the last one. So how many hours have you logged in?
So I anticipated your question on the break. And I'm told it's roughly about 12 or so far. This one, not nearly as much work has been done on. And depending on what you do, if you sort of do a carbon copy, or at least a carbon copy of aspects of San Mateo County, then there wouldn't be a whole lot more. The zoning piece is going to add more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that we'll be talking about, Ray and I, we had a procedural council, procedural policy subcommittee meeting, and looking at council's ability to use council's time and trying to keep that under a reasonable amount. I kind of like the ability to present something like this to the council and say, okay, this is something I've looked into, and I think this is important, and I've had a conversation with the city attorney, and based upon that conversation, it'll take X amount of hours, and then present that to the council. And with me, I don't have any problem moving forward with it. It's just, I think we have that discussion up front first, then we can have an understanding of how long it's going to take, and are there other options as far as going out on our own or partnering with the county. And so that segues into my question. And Ms. Scruggs, if you wouldn't mind coming up here, because I just want to kind of get an understanding of how we can partner with the county, and so thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
And so
sorry for keeping you so late.
We're used to this.
So the county has their smoking and e-cigarette law.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found interesting between the county's law and San Francisco County's law is that sure, San Francisco, they have to have the longest list at San Francisco, but they're okay with multi-unit smoking. In this is how I read it here, where you guys made a strong stand, and I appreciate that you've done that.
Right.
So
to address that, I'm Shonda Scruggs, Director of Tobacco Prevention for San Mateo County Health System. The key distinction between San Francisco and San Mateo in that regard is that San Francisco has a disclosure ordinance that says the landlord must disclose if there's a smoker in the building. They view that as a first step. They have several thousand units in San Francisco, and their environmental health division has a very tough handle on actually identifying all of the units. So that's part of the issue there. We have a similar problem, but on a much smaller scale in San Mateo in identifying the units. So it's a lot easier for us to be able to say which would be included and which would be not included. Part of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Proposition 99, which was the 25-cent tax assigned to the packages of cigarettes. Well, that money is what funds the work that I do, or part of the work that I do in San Mateo County and in every county throughout the state. It also funds legal technical advisors, Change Lab Solutions out of Oakland, who we use to provide city attorneys with additional information to reduce the cost for cities so that they don't have to spend a lot of time on the research. And that's what the Assistant City Attorney was mentioning, is that we can provide her with those templates that she can kind of plug and play, so you're not spending a lot of time. We have been working with several jurisdictions throughout the county to pass ordinances around smoke-free multi-unit housing, the inclusion of e-cigarettes in the definition of tobacco products, and tobacco-free pharmacies. Just Monday, Burlingame passed their ordinance to prohibit smoking in multi-unit housing, and more than 50% of the residents of the city of Burlingame live in multi-unit housing, apartments, condos, and townhomes. Daly City has done it. Belmont has done it. Foster City has done it. The city of Belmont will be considering a similar zoning type ordinance around e-cigarettes and vape shops in September. And Daly City last week passed their ordinance to prohibit tobacco sales in pharmacies. So these efforts are not, going to go away. These are trends that are happening throughout the Bay Area and throughout the state. And it's one of the reasons why San Mateo County has one of the lowest smoking rates in the state. But even if less than 10% of our residents actually do smoke, that very small number of people can impact a much larger group of people. And that's why we look at these types of ordinances, to protect the health of people who choose not to smoke. We never say that smokers have to quit smoking. We believe that's a behavior, and if they choose to do that, that's fine. But what we have an issue with is that their behavior then impacting the health of someone else and that person not having a choice. And that's why we look at these ordinances. They're never a push to tell someone they must stop smoking. It ends up being a place restriction.
Okay, and then, so our assistant city attorney mentioned that the only state regulation on e-cigarettes is you can't sell it to minors.
Correct, but there is currently no enforcement mechanism for that. So that's one of the reasons why State Senator Leno's bill was introduced, was to build in enforcement mechanisms for that. In the initial session of state legislature, that bill was pulled by State Senator Leno and has been reintroduced as a special session along with 6 other tobacco-related bills. Yesterday, all of the 6 of those received majority approval in the Senate, and they will move to the Assembly. So there is a special session that covers tobacco-related bills only, and 3 of those will address e-cigarettes.
Okay, so, and do you know if they're addressing some of the concoctions that go into?
So it would cover the actual devices, and one legislation looks at the paraphernalia, because we know that these devices can be modified to put any number of things in them, not just tobacco and nicotine. Right. So they're looking at regulations to cover the devices as well as the nicotine component. So right now, as the assistant attorney said, there's no state regulation on e-cigarettes other than the prohibition to sell to minors, but there's no enforcement mechanism from that. We've heard from minors that they can buy them at the corner store. They don't have the restriction of being behind the counter like traditional tobacco products. So a minor can go in and grab them. They might steal them, but oftentimes the retailers will just sell it to them because they're not aware. There's no restrictions for them to purchase them online, so they can order them online. There's no verification. So that's what the state is trying to do, is to wrap laws around all of those things to prevent the use of e-cigarettes to minors.
All right, great.
Yeah. So it's a lot going on. It's a great amount going on. And so we are here to assist the city with any efforts they want to pursue. And as the assistant city manager said, that some cities have just adopted what the county's done and others have done it piecemeal. And that does take a longer period of time. We have comprehensive model ordinances that essentially the cities plug in their name, select which of the findings they want to use, and move right forward.
That's very easy. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And part of the Proposition 99 money pays for legal consultants to put that information together to take the burden off of the cities.
Okay, so Teresa, so you're anticipating us getting back some of that money that has gone into your work and what you've laid out here to be reimbursed back to the city through Prop 99?
I don't think there's a reimbursement.
No, there's
mechanism.
not a reimbursement. It's that the documentation and kind of the background research work has already been done by those attorneys, whereas then the city attorney has less to do when they craft it for the city.
So the numbers that I've presented to you presume that I'm getting these resources free, and so it's substantially reducing the amount of legal fees that you would have to pay.
Absolutely. Okay.
And the county board of supervisors, the county council vetted their policy for 3 years. So
Yeah.
they spent a lot of time on it. So
Pretty
we tell the cities no need to spend so much time on it because we've had lots of attorneys already do that.
Yes, that's good.
Can I ask a question while you're up there? So for the cities and the county, which has already adopted these ordinances on multi-unit housing, what does the enforcement look like?
So it's generally complaint driven in most cities. And we ask for cities to have a long implementation phase, probably up to a year. That gives for several points of education for the residents, because ultimately what we want to happen is residents simply comply. That we're not calling the police to go out and cite people. That's not at all what we encourage. We want residents to be notified that they just adhere to the policy, that their neighbor could say, hey, are you aware of this? The landlord can say it. And only then, after those points of education, would we want someone to call the police. But even still, it's very rare that it happens. In Belmont, since they passed their policy in 2007, they've only issued one citation since 2007. All the rest has been education, and that's the way we want it to happen. In Foster City, who passed their policy last year, they've received essentially the same number of calls for smoking complaints as they did the previous year, but the increase was from Councilmember Perez. So that was the only difference, was that Councilmember Perez called more often than the residents did. And that was the only difference in the number of complaints that the police received. So we have found that residents, we want there to be a behavior change and a cultural norm change, not some slapping people with a stick to penalize them. We just want them to change their behaviors.
And on the zoning ordinance issue, has the county and your office been providing any assistance on that, or do you have an experience in what other cities have done?
So our legal consultants have drafted legislation around zoning as well that we can provide to the city attorney. None of the jurisdictions in San Mateo County have looked at it specifically, but the city of Belmont will be looking at it in the fall because they feel that the 4 vape shops that they have right there on El Camino is not really conducive to the type of environment they want to have in their city. So they will be looking at ways to do that. There's legal non-conforming, and you grandfather people in, and if they go out of business, it's just kind of the end of it. In San Francisco, they limit the number of tobacco retail permits that they issue so that over time, by attrition, there's fewer and fewer stores. And so when they set that cap, they put in an exclusion that none could be issued for vape shops moving forward. If they already had one, it stayed, but no new ones could be issued. So they do it by district, and they don't want, I think it's around 40-some per district in San Francisco.
So has the county council already vetted whether vape shops can be prohibited outright, or are there zoning restrictions?
No, not at the county level.
Okay.
But Belmont is currently looking at ways to address that.
Okay.
So a vape shop and a vapor lounge, they're the same.
Yes, yes. And so if state law changes the definition of e-cigarettes to match that of tobacco, they would fall under all of the tobacco ordinances, which means in your city where you have a tobacco resale license, they now are required to pay a retailer fee, and they're then subject to our compliance checks by the sheriff's office that my office pays for them to go in to make sure that they're not selling to minors. Right now, there's no built-in enforcement mechanism. I've asked the sheriff's department to go out and do spot checks, but oftentimes if a youth is sent in to ask for an e-cigarette, sometimes the retailer is confused. We have them to ask by brand. We say, go in and ask for a blue. And they go in, and then the retailer is confused. So there has to be some level of retailer education too, because again, this is not to continue to penalize retailers. It's to make sure that they're aware of what the laws are and that they are adhering to it.
If the retailer is confused, how would they have sold it to them?
The retailer is confused that they don't know that there's a restriction that you cannot sell to minors. So they know that they can't sell cigarettes to minors, but they don't know that they're not supposed to sell e-cigarettes to minors. But again, there's no built-in state enforcement of that. So when the state health department goes out and does compliance checks throughout the state, they're not asking for e-cigarettes. They're only asking for tobacco.
And with respect to e-cigarettes, you said that the other cities have put in place regulations on sale of e-cigarettes. What about use? What if people or teenagers are bringing it into town, and buying it elsewhere? Is that something that's being regulated?
So what the cities have done is those who have changed their definition of tobacco to include e-cigarettes, that allows the police to enforce those policies the same as they would with tobacco. So under Penal Code 308, a police officer can cite a youth for being in possession of a tobacco product. They very rarely do that. It's usually as a mechanism when they suspect something else. When they see them perhaps committing another crime, they can add that one to it as a means to search them. Is very rarely used, but the police currently have, and that's been on the books for like 100 years. The police could do that.
Okay.
It's just rare that it happens. So ultimately, that's how cities are addressing the possession of minors having possession, is by treating them the same as tobacco products. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, I do have just a couple questions to staff. So, if you know, a business owner who wants to open up a vapor lounge in Brisbane, is that a permitted use in our city? I mean, what what requirements would they have to do if they wanted to open something tomorrow?
It would be the same as any other business establishment. There's no particular requirement or additional imposition on a business that's selling e-cigarettes. So it would be the same zoning requirement as any other business that's selling anything else.
Okay, so I mean, you could have a liquor store selling e-cigarettes, but then to me, I think that is different than a gathering place where people go and hang out and smoke. I think of that as a lounge, but there's no you wouldn't need some kind of special permit.
At this point, no. I mean, you have your zoning ordinance, so it would be a business establishment that would be a lounge, and so it would have to be in those areas of the city where you allow those types of businesses. But there is currently no additional restriction or requirement that someone who was having a vapor lounge as opposed to some other type of social gathering place would have.
But like when you go to the Brisbane Inn and you want to have a cigarette, you got to go outside. You're not inside the lounge, or you're outside. So how does
there's no restriction right now. Certainly the individual that runs the lounge could adopt a policy that we don't allow e-cigarette smoking in the lounge. You have to leave to do it. But there is no regulation on the state level, on the federal level, or on the city level. And the county restriction doesn't apply within Brisbane.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the county law, and let's see.
I think our community development director wanted to expound on that. Yeah.
Just if I could, one of the issues that if the city attorney is going to review the zoning aspect of this, there are certain regulations with the zoning ordinance right now, which is somewhat interpreted as if something is not expressly permitted in the code, it's prohibited. So I would think the city attorney would want to look in that language with the idea of a lounge, a vaping lounge, whether or not that is akin to a permitted use or not.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, John. So, okay. All right. Okay, that's it for the questions. And, yeah, I have something else for the comments, but I'll wait until later.
So I have one question for staff. Have we looked at what the new marijuana laws that they're planning on legalizing marijuana in the state of California would have on the e-cigarettes, vaping, cigarette, tobacco use, and the implications with that, since the state looks like they're going to be going forward with permitting smoking so that they can raise money? And how would that affect this type of legislation and or any other legislation where Brisbane may want to take advantage of economic development?
I have not looked at it. That's something that I'm hoping that the county has looked at, the impact there. Again, this is sort of stopping in our tracks where we are and coming to you to see whether you want us to look at more. So we haven't resolved all the issues, but certainly the medical marijuana piece is addressed in the county legislation. There's an exemption essentially for medical marijuana usage, but in terms of legalizing marijuana beyond medical marijuana. It's sort of an open issue for me in terms of what would be the impact there. So again, I'm not coming to you with all of the research done on all of the issues that have been raised, and I think that you raise a good point, and that's something we would need to look at, hopefully with some assistance from the county so that we can do it in a very efficient way.
Some of the information and what I've seen and heard has been that a lot of the e-cigarettes have been designed for marijuana use. And so it's something that it's the same device as she said, that you can put different materials into the same devices. And so I think that would be something that we would want to see before we really pushed forward, how that would affect any bans that we put on or legislation that we put on products, because I think that with the amount of medical marijuana that goes on in San Francisco, you walk down the street and you're not smelling tobacco smoke, you're smelling marijuana smoke. And seeing people vaping and it smokes more marijuana than tobacco. And so I think that with the state going forward with appearing, and other states appearing to be condoning it for revenue processes, I think it's something that we should look at what those implications would be in our case. And again, as Clara Johnson said, businesses need to have the amount of people willing to use them to be a viable business in Brisbane. And I'm not sure that the cost of zoning for a vapor lounge is something that would be reasonable to expect that we have the clientele that would be profitable to come in to Brisbane to do that kind of business. I'm not sure. I see several of them in other towns in the county, but I don't know where their profit center is. And certainly my thought would be everyone knows that cigarette smoking is bad for you. We all know that. It's sort of like sea level rise. We know it's coming. And so, promoting people not to smoke and promoting children not to smoke is a good thing.
Is your microphone on, Terry?
No, it's not. But we know that that's not a good thing to be smoking. But I would want to make sure that we mirrored other people's, and instead of making our new legislation, just like we came in with other legislation that needs to be changed a year later because state laws have changed and county laws have changed, and then we need to bring our laws into compliance. We're a really small community, and I don't think we should be the one inventing the wheel. The other issue I have that I think needs to really be addressed is homeowners, multi-units. If they're homeowners that own their unit, how can we go in and change their ability to do something in their home, a right that they've already had? And what are the legal ramifications of, I know Lori mentioned the apartments on Joy Avenue, but those aren't apartments, they're condos. So people own those units and may have a vested right, a current right, to smoke in those units. And I'm not sure how changing the laws would affect homeowners in their own property that they own. Are we going to say you can't smoke in your car, or we can't smoke within the city limits when it's a state? It's a law that it's legal to smoke. But there may be restrictions on where you can smoke. So I think those are things we'd need to look at, and I think they would take some attorney time to look at, but I think we need to be very, very cautious in going in to try to be the cutting edge on this.
we have for discussion, we're going to bring have the public, come to the podium.
Well, we can have the public come to the podium, yes.
Okay.
So I have letters, and if any of the people who wrote letters would like to reiterate, I think Tony already spoke once on this, but you can speak again.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. This is a conundrum, and we're really walking the razor's edge here. And I think we all know that nicotine is poisonous. Comes from deadly nightshade, same family. And it's also a powerful drug, and it's a powerfully addictive drug. And I was addicted to it for 17 years. I started smoking. I already knew I shouldn't smoke. I don't even want to go into the story about why I started smoking. I came from a family of smokers. And I quit, and it was really hard to quit. I quit 17 years ago. 2 days ago was my anniversary. And it was torturous because I had a heavy nicotine habit. I was up to, pack and a half a day of Players, Navy Cut, and unfiltered. It affects your brain chemistry. It is a dopamine producer and an MAOB inhibitor. It is the it is the poor people's tranquilizer. And one of the reasons San Mateo County has one of the lowest smoking rates is we also have the second highest median income in the state of California. Smoking is often associated with lower income. Many older people are addicted to cigarettes and have not been able to break that brain chemistry. I cried every day for 3 months because I quit cold turkey. You need to look at the realities of this drug addiction just the same way that you would look at the realities of many of the other problems we have in society. And to take multi-unit buildings and say, you can't smoke now. I want you to think about older people, who are so addicted that they have no hope of really ever quitting. And I can't help but think about my dad, who did quit for 7 years and then went back to it. He started smoking during World War II. At 88 years old, he still smoked. And his end of days were very challenging. If he had had to go outside or walk, far, far away to have a cigarette, it would have been extremely, a huge amount of torture. In the last couple of days, we actually used a nicotine patch because that's how addicted he was to nicotine. So there's no doubt in my mind that it's a bad thing. But at what point are you willing to torture people to comply to what you think they should do? I don't think that people should have aspartame. I think it's poison. Monsanto invented a poison for us. I don't think people should have hydrogenated vegetable oil. It's also a huge health threat. But you need to be realistic as you go forward with this law. No, I think it should be illegal for children to smoke. I think it should be illegal for children to drink. I think it should be illegal for them to do drugs. I think it should be illegal for them to drink soda, and I think it should be illegal for them to drink anything with aspartame in it. And I think that trans fat and hydrogenated vegetable oil is killing this country. But where are you going to draw the line in the sand? Yeah, tobacco's the big bugaboo. Oh, but we're willing to accept marijuana now because we get money for it. So I guess as we move forward, we really need to remember that we're walking the razor's edge, and we need to remember that this is the United States, and there are certain freedoms. Okay, I mean, we could easily be spending the same amount of time, legislating against guns. I don't know. I just have a hard time with this, and I think about so many of the older people who won't have any place else to go, and they don't own their own homes. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do to them? Make them, go out 5 blocks away to a little cubby hole to have a cigarette because they're so addicted they can't do anything about it now? Are you going to supply them with patches? Are you going to, spend some money on having non-smoking programs for them to try to help them? So tread lightly. I agree with the health issues of smoking. I quit smoking because it is bad for you. And I wasn't afraid of dying young. I was afraid of living badly when I got old. Emphysema and cancer and all those horrible diseases. But you really have to temper where you're going with some of this stuff, because there are people out there who are never going to be able to quit. Just like there are people who are never going to quit drinking. And just like there are people who are never going to quit drinking diet soda or eating French fries. So tread lightly where you go, and think about those people too. And yeah, I know the health risks of smoking, and secondhand smoke. But at some point, you got to tamper down the zealotry to a real level of humanity. And we all live together in this world. And, at some point you need to think about where your bubble bursts someone else's bubble. Because all of us have a bubble around us that are our personal rights. And your rights only go so far as they don't burst someone else's bubble of personal rights. So I think we really need to think about that as we move forward. Thank you.
Tony Varios, Mayor and City Council. As Shonda Scuggs said earlier when she spoke to you, the focus is not penalizing smokers. The focus of all of these ordinances is not criminalizing smokers and their addictive behavior. They can still smoke. They can still find places to smoke. The majority of people in this city and in this county don't live in multifamily housing like San Francisco. San Francisco, like all big cities of its type, happen to have many more multi-unit housing apartments and condos. So I think that you would find, if statistics were available to the city attorney and provide to the city council through staff, that there are ample homes, single-family homes, that provide people who are smokers adequate opportunities to live there in peace and enjoy their smoking without forcing it on you, their neighbors, children, or grandchildren. And while my wife and I haven't been blessed with our own children, unfortunately, we do have a lot of empathy for everyone else's. I volunteered with the Boy Scouts for, say, about close to 40 years now. So I'm concerned about youth in general. And in all of its aspects, this is a problem that's taken way too long to be addressed by society. Now, we know that as education has advanced, as medical science has advanced, more and more people have been able to accept the problems of smoking. And it's usually associated with cigarettes, but anybody who can connect the dots understands that cigarettes, cigars, pipes, and every other form of smoke, including marijuana, smoke is smoke. Your lungs don't like smoke. All you have to do is put your lungs in a close proximity to a bunch of smoke, and they will tell you they're not happy. They don't like it. Now, if it's drug smoke, then you get a different reaction. But it's still not good for your lungs. It may be great for your brain or make you feel good, but it's not good for your lungs, not good for your health. I don't think you'll find any scientists or doctors that are going to dispute that statement. Whether it's an oncologist or any other medical professional, I think it's pretty simple. Smoke's not good for us. As far as I'm concerned, I understand the mayor's concern and the city's concern for not wasting money, because nobody would ever accuse me of wanting to waste money on pointless legal research. And reinventing the wheel is not what we want to do. That's why when Councilmember Lentz suggested, is there something we can copy? Obviously, that's a helpful approach in many instances. But in this particular case, I think that as much as people make fun sometimes of the city of Berkeley and other cities that take leadership positions, which is something that San Francisco rarely does, at least not these days, I think this is a case where we have a small town, we have a lot to protect, nobody's going to question the value of their children and grandchildren's health. Everybody wants to protect that. I'm pretty sure of that. So I don't think you're going to lose any votes there. I would not suggest to you that people can't have a barbecue on their house or their deck. But I would suggest to you that barbecue smoke is dangerous just like cigarette smoke is. And I'm happy to see that most of the barbecues that are sold these days are probably gas operated. I mean, it's very popular. I wouldn't ban charcoal and wood barbecues, but I do think that any ordinance that deals with this issue should deal with smoke, and specifically smoke in multi-unit dwelling situations, apartments and condos. The comment about senior citizens not being able to enjoy their last days or their end years, I think that's impassioned but very badly focused, off the point. I don't think we could point to specific examples where there is a lot of that happening in multifamily housing in Brisbane at this moment. In terms of people's rights, obviously you'd have to defer to the city attorney and legal research to tell you exactly how those laws would affect people's rights. It would seem to me that the normal process would be that if you pass a law today, it's not retroactive, and if a person's living in a apartment or a condo like where we are on the Ridge, if there are smokers there today, they're going to probably be able to stay there, and they're probably going to be able to continue to smoke. But when they move out, if they sell their unit, and the law says there's no smoking in multi-unit housing in Brisbane, then the next person that buys that unit doesn't have an expectation of being able to move in there and smoke. I think that that's the proper reading, and of course I'll defer to the legal experts. There's 3 of them here tonight. But I think that that's pretty much the way it would come down. So unfortunately, the rest of, other than Councilmember Liu, most of the parents who have kids and are concerned about this had to go home. And so I'm stuck here as the one without the kids that has to speak on their behalf, other than you for raising the subject. And I appreciate very much that you did. And I would hope, as difficult as it might be, that the council would have the strength to look deeper into this, because there's so many bad laws written. We don't need another bad law. But if you can craft it well so that it does what it's intended to do and doesn't create a bunch of other unintended consequences, then I think you'd be doing a great thing for the unborn children that are coming along in the future, the ones that are here now, and people like myself who just hate smoke. So thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Seeing no hands. Discussion?
All right. You know, I would like to see us move forward with the county's partnership in adopting the smoking of tobacco products and use of e-cigarettes, prohibition in the items that are listed here. When I look at the vapor lounge type of issue, I see in this law where, if you're going to do it, to me it seems that this law kind of restricts it already. When you look at things like businesses patronized by the public, enclosed areas accessible to the public. I mean, if you're thinking about having a lounge, and you can't smoke in there. So it doesn't. To me, I don't think we need to move forward with creating some kind of vapor lounge regulation. There was in our written communications, we had something in regards to people smoking in front of establishments on visitation. And so in the state law, there's something, the third one down, it says within 20 feet of main entrances, and, some other stuff in regards to state, county, and city things. Perhaps if we had something that was our own flavor where, not allowing it within 20 feet of a main entrance if a back entrance is available. So that then perhaps the back entrance of the Eagles Club, they could still be out there smoking, but not right out in front where kids are walking by. Because that entryway is just right there on the corner. If you're a kid walking by, you're going to be, I don't really consider them being exposed to the smoke being detrimental to their health, but I think it's just the actions, and
the glamour of it all.
The glamour of it all, exactly. So, but I don't want to restrict the members either. But if it was in a location that I think provides a win-win situation, we should have that in place. So, I would like to make a motion to move forward, adopting the assistance from the county in regards to.
But you're looking at something that is the first option that our assistant city attorney brought forward, which was to mirror the county ordinance.
Yes. I agree with you that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but that I did add that one piece just because I think that's kind of a unique situation for us, and it was brought up in the written communication about that particular use or that club doing smoking right in front of the main drag. So if there was an option to be able to prohibit that, if an alternative location was available, I'd like to see that in the eventual ordinance.
Okay, because the Brisbane Inn will have that same problem with two entrances that aren't really back entrances. But I mean, I think that we all agree that some regulations could be good, but I do think that there's issues that need to be looked at, and of course, looking at issues costs money. So.
Yeah, and the city attorney had said that it would be around 12 hours, was it? I think it was 12 hours.
10 hours if we copied and paste.
And so fewer than 10 hours. And I think we'd all be fine with that.
To do more research?
I think to bring forth the ordinance before the council, and let's just do it. I don't think we need to do more research. I think it's just, the city, we task the assistant city attorney to work with the county and come up with an ordinance that is appropriate for Brisbane, and then hopefully we have it before the council after the subcommittee works it out with the city attorney, and we approve it hopefully within the next couple of months.
So I have a couple of responses to some of the comments I heard, and I appreciate everybody's viewpoint on it. I know there's a lot of strong opinions from people on both sides of the issue, and it's a complex issue because we don't want to penalize people, but I don't think that's really the intent here. And Michelle, you had made a comment about, well, what do we do about the seniors who are highly addicted? Where can they smoke? Well, the county ordinance, as it was explained to me when I met with the representative from Breathe, California, she said that we can have a carve out so that there can be a location that is available at the housing development so that where smoking is permitted, so they don't have to go down the street, but it has to be a room that does not have ventilation going out to a common area. It has to be kind of a contained area. not near like the laundry or the pool or, any sort of common area that might be frequented by a lot of members of, the public or the people who, the residents who live there. So, by restricting the smoking inside the units doesn't mean that there's nowhere on site for people who smoke to go to smoke. So that's one point. Terry, you had said that, we need to think about, well, what do we do with condos that are owned by people who live there, and, where do they go, and can we legally restrict that? Is it decreasing the value of their property somehow? Well, my understanding is that the county council has looked at that when they enacted when they vetted their county ordinance, and that the county ordinance does in fact apply not only to rental units but to resident-owned and occupied condos. So, we can get confirmation on that, but it appears that that's already been looked at and that it is actually legal to regulate that. And Cliff, you had just mentioned about vaping lounges, and what the ordinance could do is not just regulate the vaping lounges, maybe we don't see that as a big issue, but vaping shops, so that there's essentially a vaping shop, so so that people couldn't actually buy the product here, not just use it on site for whatever purpose. So, and they're popping up all over. I see them when I drive through Daly City and San Bruno and up and down the peninsula. These vaping shops are coming up. So just because we don't have one now doesn't mean we won't get one. So I think it's better to be ahead of the curve. And I don't see this as, being really cutting edge. It's more like, following suit of what other forward-thinking communities on the peninsula and throughout the Bay Area have been doing. So we can really utilize and benefit from what's already been done at the county level and utilize those resources. So I think it's worth the investment, and it won't be that costly. And the as to the vaping lounges, I'd like to see, it says that there would be, I guess, 10 to 12 hours of research and other work done that might be necessary. I'm wondering if, we can at least initially just have our city attorney reach out to the county council and or to the representatives from the county that can tell us what has been done and how could it work in our city specifically, because we're so small geographically. Could we just put in place a very simple zoning regulation that, like I said before, would essentially, because of how close the schools and the parks and everything is to one another, if we say it can't be allowed within, say, a mile of any of those types of locations, that, it would simply, in effect, prohibit those types of, prohibit the vaping shops. So.
Yeah. I personally, I don't know if I'm there just yet. I think if people want to buy the product, if they, Julie's Liquors wants to sell e-cigarettes next to their regular tobacco products, what makes the difference of selling one or, prohibiting one over the other? But, you talked about, taking away people's rights. I don't look at it, you didn't, but I know that is something that's been brought up. And, my dad, he died of cigarette smoking. And he died at 58. He had squamous cell. And he smoked all the way till the end. My uncle, he got the same thing, but he quit, and he's still alive. But, it isn't like telling people that they should be healthy and that they should stop smoking or that we're picking on them. It's really, what are the ramifications of your actions on others, those innocent people that are, that are affected by your actions. And just because you have an addiction, so to speak, that then doesn't mean that it's still okay then for you to, put this this health issue on somebody else. And so, I'm glad that the county has spent the years doing the legal work to make sure that what they have in place will stand up. And so they've done the work. The cutting edge stuff doesn't need to happen. We just need to adopt something that is in line with what already exists, but just changing the county to the city. So I hope we can move forward soon.
So I'll second your motion.
And so for clarification, does that include the component about the zoning or just the multi-unit housing?
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
From what I understood, no other counties or no one else in the county has looked at zoning on
Belmont is considering it
They're still
in the fall. That's what Ms. Scruggs told us. So I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with all of with those three items to authorize the committee to explore regulations of e-cigarettes, multi-unit housing, smoking, and the zoning regulations of tobacco products or of e-cigarettes.
I think there's a motion pending. Is that intended to be an amended motion or friendly amendment, or?
It's I guess, a separate motion because his motion isn't including all of what I would.
So you're making a substitute motion to include all of the items, including the research with respect to the vapor lounge issue, correct?
Correct, the zoning issue.
Okay, so there would need to be a second on that substitute motion for the council to consider that.
Yeah, I didn't realize how badly it jinxed this meeting.
You second this? You seconded his motion?
Yeah. But, I'm open to further discussion of this. I mean, I don't think that, unless I misunderstood Cliff, that he was saying, you can't look at that. But maybe I was wrong about that. Or is that what your intent is?
No, not that you can look at it. Though there are additional legal costs.
Yeah. Sure.
And so, I think I would prefer that. So, in regards to what the law states, or at least what the county law states, it talks about enclosed areas accessible to the public, businesses patronized by the public. So, what it's basically saying is you can't smoke inside these places, whether it's tobacco or e-cigarettes.
So
what we're trying to look at is, do we want to prohibit our businesses from
So what
selling?
you're suggesting is that there's another vehicle other than zoning for achieving the same purpose? Right?
That might be something that Michael might want to jump in on, but as far as zoning to prohibit the e-cigarettes from being sold in our town, which is basically what you would be saying, Lori. I'm not in favor of it.
I'm gonna cut through it. I'm gonna second Lori's motion, because I said at the beginning I would support that, and haven't wavered from it. So.
Okay, there's a substitute motion on the floor with respect to all of the items that are set forth in the agenda report, including spending additional time with respect to the zoning issue on the vapor lounges. So that's the motion that you have in front of you right now.
So just so we're clear, we're talking of an unknown cost of the original motion, or the original to do same as county was about 10 hours. Zoning ordinance was another 10 to 12 hours, plus the meetings, plus the research, plus the other issues. And looking at amending the county ordinance would take some additional time. And while the assistant city attorney did not give any time frame for that, maybe we'll split the difference. I don't know, because there was no time factor to cobbling together a faceted approach. So Cliff's original motion was the 10 hours approximately for a similar item, and that was seconded, I think, by Ray. And Lori's motion is for basically unknown, somewhat unlimited,
No.
to look at all of them.
No, it's what is in the staff report, the fewer than 10 hours for the first item, which is multi-unit housing and e-cigarettes, plus the zoning issue, which was estimated to be 10 to 12 hours.
Not including planning commission meetings and additional research as needed.
The research is included in the 10 to 12 hours on the zoning piece. Let me back up, and I may be able to explain this better. The not more than 10 hours would be if what you want is essentially a mirror of what the county has done, with perhaps minor changes, but for the most part, what the county has done either in whole or substantially, or some piece of that, if you want to accept some pieces and not others without doing a lot of tinkering. There will be additional time if you want us to look at the zoning issues on regulating the sale within Brisbane. There's some research there, and then we would need to draft the ordinance and do the agenda report. That would also take some attendance at the committee meetings, as well as the Planning Commission and the Council. So the 10 to 12 hours would be the research and the writing aspects of it. We haven't included an estimate for attending the council meetings, the committee meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, or the council meeting, because it's hard to predict at this point how many we're talking about, how much public comment we would have, how much back and forth we would have on that. So that 10 to 12 hours does not include the meeting time, but it does include the research time.
If I can ask a question, Madam Mayor, could we do, say, a moratorium on the sale of e-cigarettes for a year and just kind of see what other cities do, and for that year we don't allow it?
That's part of the issue we need to look at is to what extent can we just flat out ban this? And that's something that we do need to look at there. That's not a question that we can answer at this moment. It's going to require some research. But certainly start with the county. To the extent the county has any research, we'll start on that and piggyback and take it from there. But, doing a moratorium on something that you can otherwise do, that would certainly be an option. But we have to look at to what extent we can do that.
So I'm also under the impression that this agenda item is to provide guidance and not to make final decisions on what the final ordinance looks like.
Absolutely.
And so some of the items that Cliff is bringing up and that Lori are bringing up are items that we haven't found where our road is going to be and what our limitations will be with state regulations.
That's correct. You're sort of doing a preliminary take on this. Do you want the council to dig deeper? Do you want us to look into this, and do you want to spend the legal fees in order to pursue this, or is this something that you're just not interested in pursuing any further? Certainly when it comes back from the committee, the council is free to do what it chooses at that point in time based on the legislation in front of it, can make amendments, can decide to go in a completely different direction. So you're not binding yourself in any way. The issue is really a budgetary one.
Yeah.
Do you want to expend the legal resources to go down this road, or do you feel like you want to give the committee a different direction?
Well, as we know, once you go down a different road, the fees can add up very quickly, and the expenses can. So we have a motion on the table. We have a second. We have a second motion and a second. So do I call for this motion first or that motion first?
The substitute motion, Councilmember Liu's motion is on first.
Okay. So for the substitute motion for Lori, and there was a second. All those in favor?
So, wait just a second. So the real difference is, if I understand the conversation, is that the substitute motion specifically says we're going to look into the zoning issue for the vaping lounges as a legal research item and bring back a recommendation to the council, whereas Cliff's motion doesn't go that far.
Correct.
If I got
Is
that
it
right.
vaping lounges and shops?
Cliff's was a mirror with modifications. Lori's was do it all.
Yeah. My motion is to have you guys working with the city attorney to bring back an ordinance, so we can make this a city.
But it's more of a
Not
mirror.
look at the zoning.
That is,
vaping.
yes, similar to what the county is.
Yeah.
No, since there isn't any regulation from the state, we could be going down a path where we're spending this money to.
That they're going to
make this
change
zoning,
next
and then,
week.
and then we might not have, any grounds to really keep someone out. So I don't know. It just seems to me like let's just move forward with what we can do, and the county's already done it, and then let's see how things progress. Say with the city of Belmont, or if the county decides to move forward with something like that, or the state decides to do some kind of further regulation on the e-cigarettes. But I don't think that we should be doing it.
From just to to add to that, though, when I met with Karen from Breathe California, and in speaking with I think some staff, Clay, you might have been at that meeting if you recall the discussion about the zoning. She seemed to indicate that it would be a fairly simple process given our small geographic size. So,
But she's not our city attorney who's giving us
and I don't know if our city
different
attorney has
information.
had a time to think about that issue at this point.
The issue, the legal issue is not so much the process or, frankly, even the drafting. The drafting wouldn't consume that much time. The issue is to what extent can we create the zone, the ban, not more than a mile, as you put it, from a school, which would effectively push it outside of the geographic borders. That's an issue we need to look at. If the city were bigger than a mile, so if you weren't pushing it out entirely, then the legal issue wouldn't be there.
So how long would you estimate that legal issue would take to resolve?
Well, it depends a little bit when I talk to others, whether they've looked at that issue. So if I can shortcut it, I mean a couple of hours. I don't 3, 4 maybe. If I'm not finding it much faster than that, it may be much faster. But we need to look at that issue. So we would need to look at that issue. We would then need to come to the committee, see what the committee wants to do, and draft it. I'm hoping we can do it in less than. I was trying to give you the answer if there wasn't a quick phone call I could make and get my hands on something fast. But we would need to do that and move forward. So if what you're doing is creating a buffer zone that is significantly smaller such that you're not pushing it out of the city, then you might be able to eliminate some of the research, but I'm not sure that gets you where you want to be.
Then they just move it out to the Baylands.
And then Teresa, so say we have a merchant
3 miles.
in town already selling e-cigarettes, and we did some kind of ordinance. Would they be grandfathered into being able to still sell those products?
I think we would have to look at that, but I suspect it would be a non-conforming use situation. But I would want to look at that and before I give you a final example on that. So again, not all of the issues are big, huge issues, but I think they're ones that we do need to look at before we can feel confident that what you are wanting to do, you can actually do.
Yes. Got it.
I think we were trying to give you, sort of the outside range so that there wouldn't be any surprises, so that if it took longer, then, we might be able to do it in less than that. But if we didn't want to come back and say, oh, we've now to go back to the council and ask for another 5 or 10 hours. We were trying to be conservative in the sense of how much time we thought it would take. We're not going to try and get to those number of hours, but we didn't want to mislead the council with respect to what it might take.
Well, I think we just spent 4 hours
Yeah,
we're time
on
talking
double
about
time.
this, so I'd like to call a question on the subsequent motion.
All those in favor of Lori's subsequent motion?
Aye.
Aye.
And that would be opposed.
Aye.
Those in favor of Cliff's motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
I'll support it. Aye.
That's the only motion supported.
Aye.
Okay, there's your answer.
All right. I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't, broach it, later on down the line once other jurisdictions.
It means we are moving forward with something that
we can do.
we can work with and we can look at.
We're getting batty here. It's 11:25.
Yes, and we still have important things to talk about.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Incidentally, do you want
Thank you,
a
Teresa.
motion to continue the meeting to some particular time so we have an objective to finish?
Oh, let's make it 12:01 a.m.
Second.
Anyway.
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye. Clay, isn't it your birthday tomorrow? Or?
Monday.
Monday.
We got a few days.
Okay, so we have the city manager's
Let's watch
report.
Clay go in. No. I'm not going to out you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was 3 items that the mayor and I discussed in the setting of the agenda that we'd like to report out on tonight. Those 3 items are, the first one is the Brisbane soils processing operation out on the Baylands, and also the status of the heights of the piles. The second one is the Planning Commission Baylands EIR schedule for workshops. And then the third is the precise plan for the area to our south here, the park site at Brisbane Village. So the first one, I'm going to try to just give you a briefing on, been provided some information to the council, and then Randy will quickly go through the map that shows the heights, and we can discuss that. Back in July.
Sherry, are we going to be able to put that on the?
Yes, we will, but
Okay, when we get there.
Let me go through the first part first.
Right,
and
no, I
do
just
that.
wanted to
Yeah.
make sure she'd be ready for that.
Yeah, we
Thank
will.
you.
So back in July, we got a complaint with regards to contaminated dirt coming onto the site illegally. We did, or that was fairly quickly sustained as a complaint. At that point in time, we immediately put some restrictions on the operations. Specifically that any dirt that was going to be removed off the site to another site had to have testing and analytics on the receiving end before it would be allowed to be removed. There were 4 sites or 4 projects that were doing their analytics already. The most prominent one is the what we refer to as the Candlestick site. Lennar is the developer out there. So that was the first immediate thing we did. The second, or at the same time, we brought in our engineering consultant that's been working with us on this project site, CDM, and got them ramped up to do an investigation of this particular incident, but also beyond that, to do an investigation of their practices that obviously failed in this instance because we had contaminated dirt come onto the site when the protocols and the work plan that they have are set up for that not to happen. So something obviously failed in that process. CDM has been on site. The city staff, Public Works Director and Community Development Director have been working directly with the consultant, our consultant. They have reviewed and approved a work plan relative to the what we're calling the Folsom Avenue cleanup, which is the contaminated dirt that came on site. The contaminated materials have now been removed. They are going to be disposed in a site in Utah. They are taken by rail. That's the receiving site for that type of material. We're continuing with soil sampling on site, or the consulting is, and we anticipate a final report from them to be submitted to us on the week of September 7th. I should also note that we also immediately notified the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the case handler out there, Vic Powell. He had I think a heightened sense of interest on this and communicated to the city that he was very concerned that this had the protocols had broken down and that this had happened out there. So that they actually, the Regional Water Board actually has kind of the regulatory or legal oversight with regards to the contaminants on this site. So it's very important that we coordinate with them, but it's very important that they also take the lead on that aspect of it. With regards to the overall audit of their operations, that is something that we've again asked CDM to do. They're going to be doing some independent testing. They've actually been out there riding the trucks from the excavating sites to the receiving site. So they're getting themselves completely familiar with what is happening out there, so that they can have a complete understanding of where this I guess broke down. They're also doing the paperwork audit, which is should be in place and should again be another safe check in terms of something like this taking place. We anticipate that report to get back to us the week of September 18th. It would be my intention, and I did have a chance to talk to Councilmember Conway and Miller today about this, so we do have a Bayland subcommittee that you may recall at a time in the past we worked on the memorandum of understanding with regards to this operation and brought that forward to the council. So I would anticipate bringing that report to that subcommittee of the council along with the consultants from CDM, and then we'll from there be making recommendations to the with regards to potentially amending the MOU, certainly in terms of how any future permit might be happening. I think there was also another question that Councilmember Conway raised to me today. We've talked about in the past with regards to this incident and past issues that I haven't, frankly, had a chance to talk to the city attorney about, so I don't mean to be surprising you here with this, but some sort of monetary fine mechanism that would put an added, I guess, deterrent to this type of thing happening. I'm not sure exactly how that will work, and we're going to have to kind of figure that out. And again, it's somewhat complicated by the fact that we really aren't the regulator with regards to the soils. However, I think have some, we certainly have all the land use and all the interim permit use authority, so I think we have some way of being able to deal with that. And also, I think, we want to work hand in hand with the Regional Water Quality Board with regards to that, and I think they probably will want to work with us on that. So that's, excuse me, the report out on that particular incident and what we plan on doing with that. We put on the screen the report that we received in.
Could I ask a question before you go on to the
Sure.
next issue? May I? Just quick, will those reports that you're talking about, will they identify the contaminants that are involved in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll get a sense of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
More precisely.
More precisely, and generally, as I understand it, almost anything that comes out of San Francisco, because of the nature of the fill there, has some level of contamination. So there is, I think, that whole issue will be explored in terms of the protocols here. But yes, the specifics with regards to this incident that happened in late July, will be detailed in terms of the contaminants. I indicated that they're on rail to Utah, but that whole issue will be outlined also.
At that point, normally railing material to out-of-state disposal sites means it's pretty bad. But will we also have some indication on whether this was a willful violation? And when we and follow up on the levying of fines, I'm assuming that in our original memorandum of understanding we have no mechanism for.
Well, we do. It's woefully insufficient for this type of situation. Right. So that's what we have to look at. Will we be able to identify whether it's willful? I mean, that's difficult. So I certainly wouldn't want to commit to that. We will get all the facts out on the table and all the information that we possibly can, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So we'll get the first report on the 7th of September-ish, and the other on the 18th of September.
Correct.
Okay.
So with regards to the report on the heights, I'm going to turn this over to the Public Works Director.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for bringing the lights down. So I'll apologize that some of the notes on here are scribbled. Obviously, this is part of a regular work product that I do as required by the previous grading permit and as required by your MOU. UPC is required to submit every 2 months a report that details a number of items that are worked out there. This is not only the import and the export of the soil in quantities, but it's also their compliance with the air quality and dust management plan. And as a result of the MOU, it's also a report on the elevations for the maximum height on the different pile areas. So when we went through and approved this, we had pile areas identified, areas A through E. And what you see on there in the neatly printed version is what UPC has indicated is the surveyed elevation at the site. And the numbers that are hand scribbled are, when I receive the report, I go back to the MOU and I write in there the elevations that are the maximum permitted. And you can see in this case, in every case, they are below those elevations, although admittedly on area G, the one to your upper left, it's the one closest to the tag farm, they're obviously close, they're within half a foot.
And these are submitted?
Self-generated, yes, ma'am.
Self-generated, so we had, okay. And this is from the fixed point that we agreed on?
This is this is a mean elevation above sea level, and this is taken on the highest point in the area. So there's areas A through E that are identified, and the way the MOU was written or MOA was written is that they would go through and measure the highest elevation. So it doesn't mean it's not the average elevation, it's the highest. So that would typically tell you that the rest of the areas are lower than that, but this is the high point for each of those piles.
And they're all very, very close.
I guess you could say that, ma'am. I don't know if the difference between 75 and 68 is very, very close. I certainly would agree that the difference between 73 and 72.5 is close. 65 and 64, yeah, those are really close. If you're within a couple of feet, I would say that's a fair statement, and there are a number of those that are. There's 1, 2, 3 of those that stick out, in my mind, as being very close.
And right now and I granted that's the height limits, are those based on at the maximum height permitted during the reporting period or on a particular day?
It's the maximum height permitted, but they only measure it once every 2 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not really a public hearing, but if you'd like to come and ask your question.
Are there any height restrictions on the soil, on this part, not the soil storage part, but the soil grinding part? Because that's also the highest point right now. And why are we letting the fox watch the hen house? Is there an independent audit, and rather than self-reported by the people who brought in contaminated dirt who weren't supposed to? So I'm kind of questioning like the whole thing now. I'm just like I have been for the last several years. Okay. This is really distressing, especially the contaminated dirt.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a quick question for Randy. So, Randy, you said that they do the measurements every couple of months. Did you say?
Every 2 months, yes, sir.
Every 2 months. Okay, so, say during the first month they might be higher, but then the pile gets reduced, and then at the end of the 2 month cycle they do the measurement and they're below the height. So, yeah, I guess if there's a complaint, then if we are thinking that perhaps that pile is higher than what is regulated, that we have an ability to do a quick check just to make sure that it hasn't exceeded that height amount.
I think we could do a basic check pretty quickly. Sure, you could go out there with your iPad and use the GPS on that and see if you're close. And if that number doesn't look close, you could always engage a surveyor to get you within a couple of tenths of an inch as to where you actually were elevation.
All right. So you're out there often. So based upon your experience of these heights, do you see the height limits, the points exceeding these regulation amounts?
That wouldn't be my estimate, but what I think has happened is that over the last probably 3 to 4 months, they've brought in a significant amount of soil. So I think it's the volume of soil coming in that gives the appearance that you must be over the limit, when I don't think, in fact, that you are. So that's what I think's been troubling. And they've certainly had a couple of big jobs.
Or sideways rather than...
Well, it's just, no, but even that it filled the volume. I mean, it did come up, but it just came up high really quickly. For instance, when they were bringing in the material for the Central Subway project, which is all the material that was down, it was originally being sorted over in Area B. They were bringing it in because a lot of it was clay material, which is the type of material that they want to bring in. That's why they were taking that job and getting that material, because the point of that for them is that if and when they ever go through and develop this, one of the first things they have to go in is do the landfill, right? They've got to put a proper Title 27 landfill required cover on it, and what they need is a very, very low permeable material. They need the clays, so that's why they're bringing the clays in. So that's why the areas B and D were starting to work up. And then they brought in another big job that they ended up down in Area G, and the volumes came up. What I understand now is that because they've picked up, and I don't know that they've started exporting it, but they've got both the Candlestick and a Lennar and another Lennar project, I believe, and that they're supposedly going to start having a large volume of export on it, so that the next report we see, I'm envisioning that these elevations are going to drop.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Randy.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for staff? So, thank you, and I hope that I look forward to seeing the reports that are coming in the next couple weeks.
So the second item was the Planning Commission Baylands schedule, and I'll turn this over to John.
Yes, thank you. And Sherry, there's a schedule on a slide. Again, this was considered by the Planning Commission, their meeting last week, and they came up with a schedule with 2 workshops starting in September, and then a series of public hearings starting in October, running weekly through mid-November or so. So it ended up being 2 workshops, 7 public hearings, and then 2 meetings set aside for Planning Commission deliberations. So that's kind of the schedule that they agreed to. Again, with the parameters of trying to stay within the window of that 90 to 120 day sort of window of review that the white paper set forth. So I'm glad to entertain any questions about this.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah. I have just a couple of observations. I listened to the commission meeting as well, and so the oral presentation, and there were some additional things said there that clarified matters. And I had two concerns about the way in which the written schedule came out, which was clarified and enlarged in the oral presentation. And I would hope that you would agree that when we do another written form of this, we can modify it a little so that this issues or these issues that came up in the conversation get also reflected in the schedule. And there were really two things. One is that there's that stated presentation from the applicant, UPC, which of course is totally appropriate. But it was also mentioned that other alternatives or people advocating other alternatives would also have an opportunity to present what they believe is a better scenario for the Baylands. And that's not in the written schedule, but it was already mentioned that that's part of what's intended. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that when we redo the schedule, because it's probably going to get redone a number of times as things change, that would be specifically included, so it's clear that that's what's intended, and that's what you said orally. So the other thing that isn't clear from the schedule, and this is something that's in the white paper and we've been talking about, the schedule, what it really calls out all of the different segments of the EIR, but what it doesn't do, and that's something that may be more difficult to do, but it's still important. The Planning Commission has two sides to this. I mean, the one side is the EIR, and the other side is looking at all the different land use configurations and whether or not the EIR and the land use configurations that end up being, proposed as preferable are matching. And that second part of it is again, not clearly stipulated in the written schedule. It was talked about, it was all there in the conversation, and I'm glad I listened to the meeting, so I really, got a much better and more comfortable sense of what you have in mind. But I would hope when the schedule is done again, as I'm sure it will be, that those two things are more clarified, because we've already known all along that's part of the process, and you said so. So anyway, that's my request. Mm-hmm. The second thing I wanted to mention is just the reality that some of the things that should have come together are not coming together as quickly as we had anticipated. And I'm thinking of two things. The city manager mentioned the survey, and that's been kind of delayed from what we had originally hoped. And he said, well, hopefully we'll have it, by the end of September. But that presumes everything works properly and we get enough response. And, I mean, there could be a problem there, too, and in terms of making it available in a timely fashion. And so we need to have that in mind. And then I also know that the economic studies are running behind schedule. And that, I think, as I understand it, is really more the developer just not giving us what we need, and so they can't claim that we're delaying, and they're ones that are not providing what we need to analyze what they say is going to be the economic impact. So the question, we don't even know exactly, and you were hedging, and people were saying, why is he hedging? Well, because you don't know. We just don't have that information yet, and so we can't say it's going to be available such and such, because it's dependent on what the developer produces, and then it has to be analyzed by our consultant. And so there's a uncertain time frame there. And so one of the things that, and I think I was also thinking, if we can sort of realize that maybe we can't get all this done, in a couple of months, maybe there needs to be, the Planning Commission needs to do part of it, the workshops, and then maybe have a little break because there's a lot of other stuff they're supposed to be doing, and then come back to it, or some kind of thing like that still sticks to what we really have in mind, but also recognizes that we got a lot of delays going on here, and there's 2,000 pages worth of reading. There's got to be some kind of realistic understanding of what volunteers can do, and so So I'm hoping that, and you said that too, at the 13th, August 13th meeting, that, there's got to be flexibility, and the commission's going to say, this is what we can do, and oh my God, we can't keep up with this, and the information hasn't come, and so there needs to be that kind of flexibility in the schedule, and I read your presentation and Zola's presentation as saying essentially all of that. But as you heard earlier from a member of the public, not all the people are perceiving it that way. And so I just wanted to raise all those things and hope that we're on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, if I could respond, I think your point's well taken. You have to, I think the way we looked at this, we need to have a schedule to move this along. And I think for the benefit of the public to understand which topics are going to be discussed when. But you're right, at the end of the day, if there's more testimony on a particular issue and that can't be done in a single night, or it's going to have to roll over, that'll have scheduling implications. If there's information that we expected to get that's delayed, that is material to the commission's deliberations and process, that will inherently, push the schedule. But the idea was to start with a schedule that again created some framework and a sense of urgency. I think we all understand the length of the document. I took a little issue earlier this evening, the idea that commissioners haven't had the opportunity to read these documents. These documents have been available for 2 years plus, and the final EIR since June, right? The final EIR since June. So the draft EIR has been out. They had workshops on that. I don't think there's any expectation that they're waiting for the hearings to start to read the EIR. I don't believe that's
I'm implying that.
Yeah, I don't believe that was their approach. So the idea that they have the need to digest all this information.
That's the key. That's the key. It's the digestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I have a question, if I may, Madam Mayor. So, as far as these workshops and public hearings, so the City Council you're recommending not to attend any of them, correct, Michael?
Well, as Councilmember Lentz know, we've had this discussion at the Policy Committee as of I was going to say yesterday, but it was probably 2 days ago now.
Almost.
There's attendance, and then there's addressing the commission. Obviously, at the workshop, these are not quasi-judicial matters. These are, basically legislative, or even quasi-legislative with respect to workshops. So I certainly wouldn't want to say that a council member should not attend a workshop. In fact, there may be some value in attending the workshop in terms of refreshing your recollection about what ultimately you're going to have to do, as well as what the Planning Commission will have to do. Certainly you could gain that by watching the video of it as well, but there may be something for the live performance that is beneficial. I think that I am in the process of digesting the comments that you and Councilmember Miller made about trying to draft some language about speaking at meetings, advisory body meetings, where there are legislative issues at play, and I hope to have that to you back to the policy committee fairly soon. So I guess my conservative advice would be to attend, but not speak unless it was really appropriate, whatever that term might mean, to any individual council member to speak. So I would leave it sort of that way, and I'm not trying to be purposely vague, but I think I will need to be purposely vague at the moment.
All right, thank you.
And will these all be televised, including the workshops?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
No questions.
I could place bets on that schedule. We know how the process works.
Right.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I do think that, for me, it's going to be very, it's very, very ambitious. And it's without knowing what project is before the Planning Commission. It'll be hard for them to give a final recommendation. The other scheduling difficulty I see is that 2 of our planning commissioners are running for a seat here on the council, and it is possible that both will be sitting here come December, and that would take them away from being able to do deliberations, and that could throw a wrench in the process also. And it's also very difficult, I think, for the public to plan who are interested in attending these meetings, or for us who either want to attend the meetings and still attend our own council meetings or our own campaigns. Will be difficult to have full attention span with this kind of scheduling. So besides the obvious impact it'll have on the planning commissioners, I think running right into the holidays, and I think it's going to be quite difficult. Thank you for the update.
Are you
there any
done
other
on this issue?
Hmm?
Okay, so the next one is also John, and that's the status, I guess, in terms of where we're at with the precise plan.
So there are 2 kind of components, I guess, we'd look at. One is sort of some very preliminary or soft public outreach that's been done. We did reach out to a number of community organizations and groups just to advise them that this was upcoming. Staff offered to be available to meet with organizations just to provide a little bit of background.
Will you announce to the public what you mean by the precise plan?
Oh, I'm sorry. The Parkside at Brisbane Village is a proposed precise plan, which is basically a planning tool for 25 acres, sort of at the entrance to town. It covers property at Brisbane Village, adjacent warehousing properties along Park Lane and Park Place, as well as some city-owned property along Bayshore Boulevard. The point of the precise plan is to implement our required housing site identification per the housing element. It's also looking at other sort of land use options for the other properties that aren't constrained in a way by housing requirements. And so it's to look at this in a very collective, cohesive manner, as opposed to looking at little strips of property individually. And so as part of that, obviously the community's input and engagement in that planning process is going to be very important to the staff and to the council and for the planning commission. So what we're trying to do right now is sort of activate the interest with that and make people aware of it. I think we'll be more aggressive with that starting in September in terms of information, making information available. So that's the one side of it, is kind of the outreach. The other side of it is we did go out with a request for proposal for planning firms who would undertake this planning effort on behalf of the city. We had a very good response. We sent out 8 requests for proposals. We received 5 proposals. The goal is to interview 3 firms and to have hopefully a successful candidate firm with the contract before the city council in September. So we're going through the RFP analysis and review process right now, with hopes of scheduling interviews with consultants in the next week to 10 days. So that's kind of where we are with the 2 main pieces. Again, there'll be some city news outreach that's done. There'll be some opportunity to work with the electronic town hall component on the city's website. Again, as other opportunities to to extend and expand our community outreach. So I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
I have one quick question, and you said that there was already public outreach, and how was that carried out?
Well, we did a couple things. One is, you may have noticed, anybody who's in the farmers market, 2 of the last 3 weeks, there were city staff at a table with some information, some plans, and they were available for anybody who would walk by. And so I guess today they talked to 8 to 10 people who came by and just wanted some information about it. The other sort of opportunity was we did offer to go in front of community groups. The one that we've been in contact with and actually met with was one of the HOAs up on the ridge, interested in having a brief presentation about what was the planning program was about. We're going to do some follow-up outreach to other organizations. We had several other organizations that indicated, well, they weren't having summer meetings or they'd be back in the fall, they'd be interested. But so we're going to follow up with those organizations to make sure we're kind of stay on their radar. And if we can't get a formal sort of presentation, and that's fine, part of the goal is just to get the information pushed out to their membership, because again, that's a very effective, I think, way of reaching out, sort of resident to resident or community member to community member within an organization or multiple organizations. And we really are trying to stress that as being a good way of just getting the word out what the city's planning on doing with this.
I've got another question, but
There's one more piece on the outreach. Our Mitch Bull, our economic development director, did contact all of the property owners and met with them, and all but one of them actually, and explained to them what the planning process would be about.
okay. Does anyone have a question for staff?
I got just one quick question, Madam Mayor. So, John, when you talk about the 25 acres, what you're talking about is a kind of an area that consists of 25 acres, but it doesn't mean that we're going to, necessarily rezone the whole 25 acres. This is looking at this particular area that consists of 25 acres. And
that's correct.
A lot of the uses that currently exist probably will stay the way that they are today. But it's just giving us, or giving the community, this umbrella of land to which, to participate in rethinking of particular land uses within this area.
And again, we'll make it very clear as the outreach gets a little more in-depth that, again, any sort of land use planning that the city does here, like the general plan, doesn't mean things are going to change overnight or automatically. These are still activities. If it's on privately held land, that a private property owner still has to make a decision what to do with their land. So it's not like this planning effort will result in immediate, change in that area. So I think we want to sort of explain the implications of this planning program. It's really intended to be kind of a longer-term vision that the property can evolve over time to achieve whatever the community vision is determined to be.
Are there
I think the timing on this is really, really poor, considering the schedule you just saw for the most important development that's going, forward is the Baylands, and then you put this on top of it. How do you expect people to not get confused and to be able to devote any time to do this? It seems to me that one or the other is a distractor task, and it diminishes the ability of the people of Brisbane to be well informed and to participate in the public process. You've got your survey overlaying this outreach, of which I just found out actually today as part of the Open Space and Ecology Committee, even though it was an urgent letter from the July 28th. And I feel like it's a little bit of a full plate to expect people to engage in, especially during an election. So what's the deal? I mean, is this something that can't wait a few months to where we can actually focus on it after we finish the business of the where we're going with the Baylands? Is there some big rush to go out and, build urban walls down Park Lane and urban walls around the park? I mean, what's going on? I don't understand, why you're putting so much on everyone's plate in such a short period of time. Is there a big rush? Is there a big rush to get all this done in like the next year? Is there a timeline? I don't understand what's going on. So I really think that you're asking a lot of the people of Brisbane, and you're certainly asking a lot of staff, and I think it's producing some kind of sloppy work. So I'm not real happy about it. How do you expect people to pay attention at 12:05 at night to something that is vitally important to Brisbane, how it will change the character of our town? This past summer, I was sitting at the concert in the park, and I was talking with some people about what's going to happen or what's on the docket that's been slipped under the rug where people don't know that it's happening. And they said, well, we need housing. We need this. We need that. I said, okay, look around you right now. Right now, the sun is setting over the mountain right there as you look down Park Lane. Next year, or the year after, you might not see that if there's 5-story walls of urbanization all around the park. So I think people, they can only take in so much at a time. And if you expect the public to participate more than 5 or 10 people or 8 people or the select group that you have reached out to talk to, then you cannot do it this way. And you can't do it at midnight. So, we need to participate as a group, as a community, and not have all these let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. It's imprudent.
Motion to extend the meeting to 12:15.
Second.
That'll be the last extension, as long as I can do. So, all in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
I wonder where on this, where we're going to find the time to include our planning commission in the reach out. I mean, they've got meetings every night, and one would assume every night of the week. I mean, for every night, one night a week, and then the required reading, and we expect them to participate in a public planning procedure. I think that's going to be very difficult.
John, if you could, just kind of maybe talk about, here we have this schedule for the Baylands. What is kind of a potential schedule for the precise plan? And, and how, where in the process does the Planning Commission eventually, participate in a legislative role?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing, and certainly if we didn't have any time constraints of any type, I think we all agree this isn't optimal to overlay the Baylands with this. This is all driven by some obligations we have through our housing element to move forward with rezoning these identified housing sites by the end of January. Practically speaking, I don't see any way we'll have a precise plan adopted by that time. We typically do report out on our housing element progress later in the year, at the end of March, April, as we have an obligation to report back to HCD. I think the real goal is if we can demonstrate that we are very, very close by that reporting period, I think we'll be in good shape and good stead. So I think that's kind of the sort of probably the more realistic goal of how we're going to achieve this. In terms of the formal planning commission, I think they are going to be engaged informally early on. I think say if a consultant is on board in mid-September, probably a couple months worth of community interaction and some informal involvement by the planning commission. But I don't expect that their formal involvement in terms of reviewing materials, preliminary documents would really start kicking in until after the first of next year. I just think it's going to take a good solid quarter's worth of work for the consultant to even put something together for their meaningful review as they would as a decision-making body. Obviously, we're going to want their input early on like we do any other stakeholder group. But in terms of the investment of time in reading material, and it's not going to be that heavy until early next year when a draft plan or a preliminary plan is submitted.
All right. So where the Planning Commission has this this precise plan before them with all the different form-based codes and this certain traffic circulation and access to amenities and things like that. I mean, where they have a substantial document where they're then going through it and then eventually making a recommendation to the full council.
Or it's already planned?
I mean, this is how, when we've discussed it, with the anticipation is that we will engage the community and working through our consultants to identify goals and aspirations for the entryway to our town and how we should fulfill our obligation with the housing element. I think we also, as a community, will look at how important is affordable housing and where should the affordable housing units be in relationship to the amenities that currently exist. Are there other economic development opportunities for this area that currently do not exist? We have warehouses that don't make very much money for the city. Is that the appropriate use for those warehouses? Is there another use that is better? But we need to have that engagement with the community, and we will be partnering with the county's health system to see how do you build a healthy community. I think we all agree that what currently exists is not the optimum, that we had the county land that was owned by the Crocker business entity, and they created the industrial park the way that they wanted to and not in collaboration with the city. And then when we became incorporated, we took over that location, that territory. But it's still been divided, and you can just see the way that the street coming into town is separated in this funky way because of past planning practices that were not very smart community planning. And so this is kind of an opportunity to change that and make things better while also providing that affordable housing that is required by us from the state to that is required in the housing element. And I agree, that this isn't the most opportune time to do this. But we have a project, the Baylands, and it just happens to be that the EIR is being dealt with at this time, and we have this obligation to come up with the housing element at the end of January. Though I think we'll be able to move it out a little bit because we'll be showing progress. But I think that our town is resilient enough to do it. And so that's why we also have hired consultants to take on that load. Yeah,
Cliff, if I may, we've had this conversation.
Yeah, I know.
Decision.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got like 2 minutes left here or something.
Okay.
We probably...
That's an update. Okay, you're right.
Madam Mayor, if I can make a suggestion to skip the countywide assignments and written communications. I think we've addressed those.
I do need to make, I appreciate your suggestion. I do want to bring up, I don't mind skipping the countywide assignments. Written communications, we did get the FEMA flood map firm that was sent, and was also sent to the Public Works Director. And that information includes the new federal flood maps for the city of Brisbane. And I will have those copies for the city and other city council members to review at their leisure. I think that's important. Do we want to move on to the consider appointments to the Planning Commission? Item C in mayor council members, or are we going to need to extend that to another meeting?
I don't think it's considering appointment, it's just a matter of extending.
Whether we want to.
Consider appointments or possible appointments, not an appointment.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I have a comment on that,
Okay,
if I may.
of course.
I've been watching the last couple of planning commission meetings, and it seems to me they're going pretty well. And as the mayor mentioned, you got this complication of two of the commissioners, running for office, and all this stuff coming down the road. I'm kind of coming to the position that you took before, that maybe we ought to leave well enough alone. And I think I'm glad we got the ordinance, so we have the flexibility. But maybe under the current circumstances with all the stuff that's going on, that maybe would be better to the old saying, if it ain't broke, you don't have to fix it. And so it seems to be working fine now, so let's go with it.
Any other comments on that?
I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. I mean, I could see the benefit to increasing it, but if it's working fine, I mean, yeah, I'm open to hear what other people have to say first.
Yeah, I'm fine.
That's been kind of my sense too, that planning commission's been
Then
functioning
I
well.
assume we're going to take no action on increasing the size of the planning commission at this time.
We're not going to exercise it sounds like.
Okay. And that brings us to oral communications number 2. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing no takers, make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
He was really good. He was sitting there. At first I couldn't